Hey guys, how are you? It is 5:40 and I decided to take a quick break to post another vulnerability post, and I feel like I have to put some trigger warnings out there. So suicide trigger warning. If you're someone who is dealing with that or who overcame it some time ago, just fair warning that this might trigger you, but I hope it doesn't. I heard from God this morning during my devotional, and all day I've been sort of battling with it and like, do I really have to share? Do I really have to share? But I know I really have to. And so I thought, you know what? It's almost the end of the day. It's been an amazing day, and I would like to share a bit about my story. And this story specifically to encourage those of you who are really deeply struggling with just being in this place of complete disconnect from who you are. Those of you who are just worried about your future, worried about where you are right now, feeling like you're making 20 steps forward and taking 100 steps back, just feeling like your life is in shambles, like there's just no reason to live, like you're just unimportant and there's no place for you in this world. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago when I started being so open on social media. One of the things that I had said was that I distinctly heard from God telling me to just share all my vulnerabilities and not to worry about who was watching, when they were watching, why they were watching, who was commenting, how many likes and stuff. There used to be a time when I thought I was very happy. I thought I was happy. I was the friend for so many friends. I had too many friends, at least people that I thought were my friends. I was such a high achiever, enjoyed going to school and studying and having good grades, making my parents happy and proud. And, got married. And then after a while, I just found that my light was getting pretty dimmed. I had lost so much of who I was, and that was because of just giving so much of myself and being such a deep people pleaser for decades, always putting myself second and last and putting everybody else before me. Putting everyone else before me it didn't come from a place of humility, the type of humility that God calls us to. This part of myself really came from a place of just complete lack, a complete sense of just loss. I just was flailing everywhere. I had no anchor. I had no understanding of who I was. I had no understanding of my values. I didn't know what I really, really liked, and I didn't really have boundaries. I had lost all sense of self-respect. And so I was in just place of deep hunger to get a sense of feeling worthy by sort of being a slave in a weird way to fulfill other people's needs in order to make myself feel better about myself. I was the caretaker, the helper, the healer. I was the confident. I was the person who was trying to be extremely empathetic. I was trying to assist. I was trying to problem solve. But underneath all of that, I was really trying to fix people because I did not feel good about myself. And everything came to a head one day when I was driving to work and I had this intrusive thought. And it really just felt like my body was getting invaded by this outside thing or spirit. I was just driving, and then this thought just came in and said, you know what, with all of these feelings, all these negative thoughts that you're having, the fact that you just don't feel like you're anybody worthy, why don't you just drive off the bridge? No one will realize. No one will remember you. Mind you, prior to this, I knew that something was off, right? I mean, I knew I wasn't happy, but I didn't know to what degree I wasn't happy. And it wasn't just a sense of unhappiness. It was just a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. And the thing about the way the devil works is that he creeps in oh so slightly, oh so slowly, Oh, so what appears gently. I mean, you won't even know when he is creeped all the way in and taking over. He makes so many suggestions that because we don't really have an anchor, I was just latching to every suggestion that came my way. You know, it's like you feel like I'd rather feel like I'm not worthy than sort of just be in this center of ambivalence or like not knowing. And you just start catering to all the negatives. Now, as crazy as this may sound, I really believe that God allowed that thought to happen. I don't know how to explain it, but I just believe that he did, because the day and the exact moment that it happened, I remembered going, God forbid, this is not me. What is that? I don't think this way. I just remembered thinking something is just terribly wrong. And it sort of just jarred me into this place of beginning to walk this path. It was around this time that I had met my husband, and he introduced me to a book written by Ray Dalio. And it's called Life Principles. And that book just opened my mind and my heart towards radical honesty and transparency, which for me was a very foreign concept. It didn't make any sense. How can someone be that real or that honest or that open without any kind of fear? So I knew that I was either going to, really I didn't have any options. The only options I had was I was either going to give up or I was going to give in. And giving in was really giving into all of these feelings, but not in a way where you're accepting them, but in a way where you're beginning to really see yourself for where you are at the moment, without any of the facades or any of the masks or any of the pretenses, like really just seeing yourself for where you were, which was a person who did not love herself, like at all. Being able to acknowledge that I was trying my best to love everybody else, but I was doing it from a very, very empty cup. And the reason why it was so empty was because I didn't value myself enough to pour into myself. But that's when really everything in my life changed. And that's what I want to share with you how. Now, mind you, my job was to work as a clinician, taking care of people, being there for people, being an emotional punching bag, being the person who was carrying on the weights of my patients' problems and just issues, life issues, personal issues, medical issues. And at the time, I didn't even know that I wasn't just dealing with my own lack and my own issues. I was carrying on the burden of other people's issues. I did not know how to separate myself. I didn't have a boundary between who I was and who they were. I did not know how to separate what I was feeling from what they were feeling. I was just feeling everything. So it was just such a very heavy load to carry. And the worst part about it was that I was just so afraid to share it with anyone. I had no one to talk to. Now, this is where, if you're going through something like this is where I want you to know that the devil really does try his hardest. Because when you get to that point where it's like you're at that tipping point where it could go one way or the other, he really desperately doesn't want you to make a particular choice where you choose yourself. He doesn't. And so in that moment, he will really amp up that feeling of shame. And a lot of the times it's this deep level of self-shame, feeling that you are just really not worthy. Like the mistakes that you've made are worth your life being gone. He really ramps up that sensation and feeling of shame so that you're not able to break through that barrier, that protective layer that you have around yourself, to let people see deeply inside of you. So this is where the encouragement kicks in. I want you to know that walking into that shame, walking into that space of just complete fear of annihilation, walking into that space where you feel like I can't face this, as crazy as it sounds, that is where your healing actually begins. The moment that you can face the truth for what it is, that is when the devil loses his power, because he is trying to hide you from seeing your truest potential by burying you under shame. But when you can see it for what it is, which is someone who just does not have not only a sense of God in her life or his life, but someone who doesn't realize all the love that surrounds them. So first things first, I sent a GIF or GIF. I don't know how you guys pronounce it, but I sent one that said, I am depressed. And I sent it to my family on a WhatsApp chat room. And I swear I thought I was going to pee on myself when I did that. And I think that was because I had no idea how they were going to respond. But I tell you, kudos to my family, man. I have a very strong family. I have a family rooted in love, respect, and God. And they are not perfect in any way, but they will show up for you. And I did not know that at the time. But by leaning into that fear and that shame and sharing the deepest part of me and my struggle, that was when everything broke apart and I realized, I'm not in this alone, even though it felt like it. Secondly, I began to unravel a lot of the things from my past that was really affecting my adult life. Trauma. A whole bunch of trauma. Whether it was trauma from childhood because of how I interpreted things that happened in the household that a lot of times were not even true, whether it was trauma from being in an abusive relationship for 6 years, whether it was trauma from being in a marriage where I did not feel like I had a voice. The point was that I realized that a lot of who I was and how I was showing up as an adult was coming from my past. And what that did is that it just created this perfect environment for me to act like a victim, act like I was someone who had zero control over how I was showing up as an adult. The very first thing that I realized that I did not have and that I needed was a sense of grounding, a sense of who I was, my values. And when I started working on my values, that was when I created my workbook, Finding My Purpose, and that really helped guide me into figuring out what I loved, who I was in God, why He created me, the gifts that were inside of me, the ones that I had buried, the ones that I had let go of. I had to do a quick just look back into who I was as a child and try to figure out how to trace my steps back to that child. The child that hadn't been tainted by the world, the one who was not afraid of anything, the one who knew her gifts so easily and wanted to be just everything in the world, who was just so carefree and didn't carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. I had to do a deep dive into going back into my inner child and finding her and having a deep conversation with her and trying to figure out where everything went left. And I had to apologize to her and accept her, and then begin to practice all of the self-love that I had neglected for so long. I had to learn how to love myself enough to be alone by myself without feeling uneasy and anxious or alone or lonely. I had to rediscover the things that I enjoyed and then begin to participate or put myself in places where I can begin to sort of like trigger those gifts back into existence. I had to start making decisions that were sort of counter to decisions that I would make in the past, and it was so uncomfortable. But I knew that I had to learn to sit in that discomfort so that I could see the person that was on the other side of it. Because all this time, whenever I was faced with discomfort, I would run away. In many different ways, I would run away. But by running away, I was not giving myself the opportunity to see who I would become by facing that particular trial. So I started reading Bible verses, saving Bible verses, any Bible verse that had to do with who God said I was, who God designed me to be, what God expects of my life, His purpose in my life. It was then that I realized that my ultimate purpose had to do with shepherding people, to become a fisher of men, to draw people back to God. And I also realized that my journey into figuring out who I was also a journey to figuring out who I was in Christ. Like, they worked simultaneously together, all intertwined. You couldn't separate one from the other. And I also realized that this is going to be a complete lifelong journey. I'm never going to graduate. I'm never going to get to some point where I go, okay, I can now relax. That I knew that I had to always consciously walk this path with fear and trembling. So outside of knowing who I was in God, and trying to understand that and inviting the Holy Spirit into my life to teach me and guide me, what I had to do for myself from a human perspective was that I had to start learning boundaries. And this is the reason why I talk about boundaries all the time, like I'm crazy over boundaries. I believe that the moment we lose sight on who we are as people and the perimeter of who we are as individuals, and we get sucked into the lives of other people in a way where we lose our sense of our boundaries, we are no longer who we are. We are then just mirror images of other people's thoughts, other people's feelings, other people's expectations. And so I had to sort of like de-shed myself from all of that baggage by beginning to say, I stand for this, and I stand against this, and I choose this, and I do not choose that. For 30 days, I had to learn how to say no to everything. This was difficult. Very, very, very difficult. And I didn't share it with anyone because I knew that I didn't want anyone to hold my hand through it. I knew that I had to just do it. And so I said no to everything for 30 days simply because I knew that it was going to stir up a lot of those very uncomfortable feelings. And I had to get to a point where I was comfortable sitting in that space without reneging on myself. It was almost like I had to make a commitment to myself. It almost felt like I was being so selfish, but I knew deep down that I really wasn't, but that by choosing to love myself properly, that I'd be able to love others properly as well. It didn't make sense then as much as it does now, but learning to say no was my biggest step. Then the other part, which is the part that I think is that lifelong part, was identifying the things that were so triggering to me, because there were a lot of things, and unraveling the stories that were in my head, the thoughts that were in my head, the feelings and where they were coming from. And a lot of times I would be able to identify them in the moment, but many times I just wasn't able to. So I would react, and my reactions could be more of maybe pulling away, maybe hiding, maybe being more agreeable, or accepting apologies so easily, even though I was deeply hurt, without really telling the person that I was hurt, thinking that I was doing the right thing, when really and truly by not addressing it, I was still reacting and treating people from that place of hurt. So I had to begin to do a deep dive into my triggers. I started having conversations, deep, vulnerable, triggering conversations with people around me that I love and trust. Parents, siblings, friends. I had to reach out to them to ask them, what is it about myself that you think that I need to change or I need to work on? How am I showing up in your life? And then when I noticed the similarities amongst all of them, that I knew that was the best place to begin my work. And beginning my work was to figure out, why was I showing up that way? Was it because I was depleted? Was it because I was trying to please? Was it from a place of pain? Was it from a place of shame? Was it from a place of lack or loss? Was it genuine? And I think once I was able to identify what it was, and I realized it was because I didn't have boundaries, I was so depleted, and I was overcommitting myself and therefore being inconsistent, it was only then that I was able to then start carving little almost blueprints for myself for when I'm faced with certain situations and how I want to act in those situations. By doing these things, and it's not been an easy journey, by no means necessary, but by doing these things, I've been able to really love myself a lot more. Be less triggered towards a lot of things that really could send me spiraling inside myself in ways that people around me wouldn't even know, but inside it was like turmoil. I've The biggest thing is being able to just let go of certain things that I realize I really just cannot control, and just allowing God to just handle it. Some of my triggers still show up till today, and I think that a lot of them will show up for years to come. But I know that I'm no longer lost in the opinions of other people, in the expectations of others, in the anger and uncomfortable emotions that others display towards me. I know that I'm more in control of who I am, and I am a person who is worthy of respect. I'm a person who has self-agency, who can make decisions that might be contrary to other people's beliefs. And then I'm learning how to have varying opinions, and not necessarily be tunnel visioned. And think that things have to be a certain way, not realizing that those thoughts and those expectations and values that I probably hold might be values that were other people's values that I just took on as mine. And really being able to be where I am required me to break every part of who I used to be. And so this is really just to encourage you that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. There is hope. If you told me this 4 years ago, that I would be where I was, that the weight on my shoulders wouldn't be as heavy, my mindset would be this drastically changed, I would never have believed it. But I want to tell you that it is possible, very possible. Just do not give up yet. That very difficult space, the space that you think will kill you, is the space you need to walk into. And I want you to know that I'm here, and I may not even know you, but just send me a message, send me a DM. Let me know if there's any way that I can help. I want to be here for you, because the greatest gift that has come out of this journey is having a level of empathy towards other people who've been through it. You can't learn this. So thank you once again for your love, guys. Thank you for your support. I absolutely appreciate it. This is my vulnerability post, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Peace out.